Thank you. So the theme of the webinar is really just 3 things about SOX. And so obviously there's lots that goes into SOX compliance. Most companies are looking at SOX compliance across multiple platforms. 15 to 20 is not uncommon. Now, on the Salesforce platform, there's also a lot that goes into it as well. But we're going to really boil it down to 3 of the key challenges that we see and that we can help solve. So the agenda for the day, we're going to start off with some quick introductions. I'm going to give you a very brief overview of StrongPoint for those that are brand new to it. I'm going to walk you through those 3 things that we really think that we can help with and that present significant challenges for a lot of customers out there. I will walk you through a very brief demo of these capabilities specifically. So I'm not going to do a big, broad platform demo. I'll show you a couple things, and that's about it. And we will have some time for questions at the end, but also feel free to drop them into the Q&A or into the chat box at any time. So to begin, we'll do some introductions. We have a couple of people from StrongPoint on today. My name is Paul Stas. I'm the head of sales and marketing. We also have Rick Rosler on the line. I have a really hard time keeping up with Rick's title. Some days he's a customer success manager, other days he's an architect, other days he's a developer, and some days he's even like a sales engineer. But Rick's on the line. Hi, Rick.
Hello.
There you go. So Rick is the more technical of the 2 of us. And we also have Nicole in the background as well. Nicole Dawes is our marketing communicator, or coordinator rather, and she was the one that was helping me trouble some of those communication issues that I was having. So hi, Nicole.
Hi everyone.
There you go. So thank you again for joining. I will jump right into it. For those that are brand new, StrongPoint is a managed package for the Salesforce platform. We help with a variety of things, but most importantly, I think, and really the core of what we do is SOX compliance. There's 3 steps to it. I'm going to explain this in a little bit of detail. So system documentation. You might say to yourself, well, why does documentation matter for SOX compliance? Well, the answer to that question is that for most, if not all organizations that we work with, not all changes matter for SOX. Only some do. You know, particular metadata customizations, particular types of access, particular types of configuration data matter. Everything else doesn't. So a really common example is like marketing. You know, if you are running some marketing operations on the Salesforce platform, that should not be in scope for SOX. But the question is, how do you determine what you have and exactly what is in scope and what isn't in scope? You need some extra tools to give you that visibility. And so that's kind of the first step of our tool set. The second step is now more wrapped around what's commonly called ITGC, you know, your general controls for metadata and configuration changes. Change requests, approvals, reporting, and then a really common challenge of what we call reconciliation. So going from an audit log back to the originating change request. And so not only can you say, you know, yes, I know everything that's happened in my org, like, hey, look, here's my audit trail, but you know, here's everything that's happened in my org, and here's all of the reasons why they happened, and showing that trail. That's really important, especially as I mentioned in that first bullet, for those specific things that are in scope for SOX. So if you've got particular pieces of your org that are, you know, impacting revenue and you're changing them, there should be a formal process behind that. And thirdly and finally, we always talk about it in terms of CPQ and billing because it's really the most common type of configuration data that's in scope for SOX, but this could apply to others as well. Commission modules is a really common example. And we even have also talked to a number of folks about things like Financial Force. So configuration data. So this is where you basically have like product and price and discount and approval rules that are all stored as data inside custom objects, much more difficult to track and to run change management around. And so how are you handling that? Because this absolutely has an impact on revenue recognition, and more it's in scope for SOX. And so a really kind of common hot button for a lot of our customers. And so, like I said, you know, that's kind of the quick high-level overview of what we do, where we fit in. We mentioned that this was really intended to be a a webinar about those 3 things about SOX. But just to help you all out, I created one of these really fancy, I think they call them word walls or something like that. And so this is really your cheat sheet. I'm kind of being sarcastic here because, like I mentioned, there's so much that goes into SOX that there's really no cheat sheet that's available. But luckily the Salesforce platform really does a lot to put this within reach for you. And what I mean by that is a lot of what you need to do to achieve SOX compliance is already built into the platform. So if you think of like access, for example, password policies and expirations and, limitations in terms of times of day or our IP ranges and number of tools around like transaction security and login forensics or single sign-on or multi-factor authentication. There's all kinds of things that Salesforce just includes out of the box that you can quickly implement and quickly wrap some processes around. Data is another really great example, backups and event monitoring and field history tracking and so on and so forth. All of these kinds of things can come into play for SOX depending on, what your internal or external audit partners have advised you on. And a lot of this stuff can be done natively, which is great. But what we see is that there's really 3 things that organizations struggle with. And so the first one is access. So, gaining visibility or full and complete visibility into who can see and do what in your org, specifically for those in-scope objects and critical data. Again, it's not just about everything, it's about only kind of what's critical. So how can you gain that full visibility? How can you quickly and effectively do kind of a deep dive into it and get to a place where everybody can agree that yes, this is an appropriate level of access. That can take a lot of time. And it's ever changing. So by the time you finish it, it's likely already changed. So you got to start over again. The second bullet is about metadata. And so, what configuration has been built or how is my system customized to help me drive my opportunity to cash or my R to R or my revenue recognition processes or other critical business processes. We've heard about things like license provisioning as an example, where that's a critical function that if it breaks, it could impact revenue, or if it's not working properly, could also impact revenue because now maybe you're not actually recognizing the right number of licenses or things are being provisioned to people at no cost and all kinds of other issues like that, right? So how can you really fully understand these configurations and everything that's touching them through dependencies or automation? And then thirdly, what applications in our system, and CPQ is the example that we gave earlier, but it does extend beyond that. But what applications do we have that rely on configuration data? Because that's really the rules that are driving things like products and pricing and discounts and approvals or commissions and billing and revenue recognition and so on and so forth. And so one, really getting full visibility into exactly what these are, tightening up the scope of what is in scope for audit, and kind of coming to agreement on that with auditors. And then I think, it's not listed here, but I think the most important question is then, what are you doing in order to control for changes to these things, to monitor for changes to these things, and to really have a bulletproof process so that when you are going through audit, you can quickly generate some reports and just say like, look, here it all is. This will prove to you that we have full visibility or complete and accurate visibility into what's changing in the org with respect to these 3 buckets. Okay, and so that's kind of what I'm going to talk about a little bit today. I'll show you a little bit about how you can do a deep dive into access, how you can build controls for changes to metadata or to access, what a change request and approval and reporting process could look like. And then I'll do a very brief demo of our CPQ or configuration data tools. Again, very similar to what I'm showing you in bullet number 2 there, but instead of metadata, it'll now be changes to configuration data instead. So here we are. I'm going to walk you through a couple things, like I said. So this first one is an out-of-the-box report that we have And basically what it does is it will show you at the object level every profile and permission set in your org and what cred access they have to the particular object that you're looking at, right? So here I've started with all of my profiles and I've got my permission sets and I've got all the object names, and it's going to give you your create, edit, read, delete, modify, view all. Really simple, right? But this is really leveraging all of the information that we've captured during our scans. Really simple org for us here, so I'm sure that your totals up here would be significantly higher. But really quick, simple report, easy to generate, but it does give you some of that visibility for a deep dive in a matter of seconds, rather than needing to go through and try to put all this together. You know, another example, and there's some of them that come out of the box, but you can really slice and dice this in a number of different ways if you need to. Okay. So now what we will often then hear is that you'll need a more detailed view of access of a particular type. So we can allow you to slice and dice this in a deep dive in 3 different ways. The first one is an object first view. And so here, for example, I can say, well, I need to have a closer look at the account object. I can go in and look through and select various different you know, properties of those objects that I want to have a deeper dive into. So you can see there. And then I can have a closer look to see which profiles or which permission sets I want to look at specifically against the object and the different properties that I've outlined up here above. And so here, if I just go and I add like a change manager and a solution manager, and I roll down here and grab something else instead, I can add those ones in. And now this is done through an Excel export. But it's a great way all in one sheet to give you a very granular view. If you wanted to look at this in a different way, you can do it with a profile and permission sets first view. So here you're going to go through and first select the profiles and permission sets and all the different settings that you'd like to export for them. And for users, you can obviously do a very similar thing where you can go through and you can select the different users that you'd like. Okay, look, there I am. And go in and select those settings as well. And so just to give you an idea of what this output looks like, I'm going to show you, and I already had it queued up. It would normally just get emailed to you, but here is a view of our object export. And so you can see here that I grabbed the account object, I grabbed those 2 different profiles, and I grabbed a permission set here. And it's going to give me my cred details for the account object specifically for those. And then as I scroll down here a little bit, it's going to show me all of the custom fields on the object. And if I scroll over, I'm going to see the specific access that these different profiles or permission sets have to them field by field. And as I keep scrolling down, this is where I'm going to get into, yes, my standard fields, and then the other formula fields and web links and record types, which are some of those other properties that I selected at that initial menu. And so, you know, what we often see is that you'll identify through, you know, your audit prep process, a series of objects that are material for audit or that are materially or in scope for impact to revenue. And so what you can go in and do is generate a report similar to this for a few of them all at once. You can't do too many because you run into limits, but and do a deep dive all at once. Make sure that you're at a really good level of access across these objects for audit. And then what you can do from there is once you've got that baseline in place, you can start to build out change controls and change process to monitor for changes to that access going forward. So rather than needing to report on everything, you can get to a really good place and then only report on the changes that have happened to a much smaller group of things. That would be the idea. So we'll jump into a little bit more strong point stuff. So I've talked a little bit about access. I will come back to it in a bit. I'll talk now about metadata and change management around it. So one thing that StrongPoint does for those that are new to it is that we've got our indexing and dependency mapping capabilities. And so here on the account object, for example, you can go through and select a pick list and see where else it's being used inside the system. And you can drill down and see multi-layers of that. And so if you're trying to map out like, okay, exactly what customizations are in scope for SOX, this is a really powerful tool to help you do that. Everything that we've documented ends up getting its own customization detail record. And this is kind of where we store the who, what, when, where, why about all of your individual customizations. And importantly, for audit purposes, this is also where we're capturing change logs. And so once you've installed, going forward, anytime any metadata changes inside your system, you would be able to open this up, see a change log for it, and it'll give you a time-stamped, date-stamped record of exactly who did it, and a detailed diff down below of exactly what happened. So you can see how this would be a lot more useful than just what's provided in the audit trail. We also keep it for more than 180 days, so you don't need to worry about storing it and keeping it and parsing through all of the different lines of it. If you've got a very busy org, there's a variety of different reporting capabilities that we have around this to help simplify that for you. So speaking of simplifying that for you, I'm going to introduce you to our policy record. So probably one of the most important things that we do here at StrongPoint, it's really like the brains behind the operation, so to speak. So what you can do inside the policy record is go in and specify exactly what you care about and what needs to be controlled for. So again, you don't need to monitor for all changes. You can select by specific types. You can say for code and data model changes, we need a higher level of change control. For automation changes, the same. Whereas down below, for layout changes, we don't need as much. No change control required for any changes to layouts. So you can do it by metadata type and say, these particular customization types require a higher level of change control. As a side note, we do all this for the NetSuite platform. It's very common for the NetSuite platform to be treated this way. All scripts, all workflows, all critical settings and preferences, and all roles and permissions, and so on and so forth. I think because so much of the system is revenue related, but it's not necessarily the same for Salesforce. So what we often see instead is people building out custom policies where you can actually go in and add in specific customizations to be included in a policy. And so there you would go through, and this is again where the documentation is critical, where you can really put this list together in a very effective and efficient way. So go through and selecting the specific customizations that you want to actually be controlling for. And then rather than looking at all code changes, it's only code changes on particular objects or impacting specific things. So once you've got those rules in place, you can take advantage of our change requests tools. Great way to use these natively. You can also do it by integrating with Jira or ServiceNow. And so you can do all of these tasks inside those platforms and never even look at StrongPoint. But what you'll do is go in and select the customizations that are going to be changed as part of a ticket. We'll advise you on the recommended level of change control. And so here, for example, this would be a really easy kind of red light, green light test, where if it's a green light, it means that none of these particular customizations are covered under a policy, and therefore you can just go and follow your normal process. Or red light, this is in scope for SOX, this impacts revenue, this is impacting a controlled object or component. You need approvals, and so it'll document for you which approvals are required. It'll give you an impact analysis if you are looking to understand more about the risk involved with changes, and this can really help add some productivity gains here. But easy to do that here. And then ultimately what's going to happen is that once this is approved, once your change request is approved and changes are made to these, even though they may violate a control, they won't be flagged as non-compliant because you follow the right process. Or if there is no approved change request and something changes that is covered under a policy, it would give you a non-compliant flag. We saw that on this change log. I just didn't cover it then, but you would get this non-compliant indicator, and then you can obviously leverage that in your reporting as well. So here's a quick snapshot of reporting. Native, you can customize this in 1,000,001 different ways, so I don't really want to cover it in too much detail, but you can filter this out by type, by person, by date range, by object, by level of compliance, you name it. You can leverage everything that you saw in those change logs earlier, including the little diff summaries to give you a high level understanding of exactly what's changed. But when it comes to audit time and you want to show very specifically a list of changes that has happened in your system, this is a great way for you to do that. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second. So that's kind of the end of the metadata portion of it. So we've talked about access, we've talked about metadata, talked about how I was going to spin back a little bit to access. So access can also be treated under these same policies, right? So you saw down here sharing and visibility changes. So you can look at, covering all role, profile, and permission set changes under a specific policy where they all require a certain level of process, i.e. an approved change request in order to be deemed as compliant. Or you could just do a custom policy for critical access. Very, very common to do that. Your CRM users, sales users, they don't necessarily need to be covered for changes, but others might. So a great way to do that would just be by going in and doing a custom policy against a specific profile permission set. So third component, you can see I got a lot of tabs here, but they're going to be quick, promise. So the last thing I'm going to talk about quickly is our configuration data tools. And so this demo is going to be on CPQ. So it's a starting point. What I've done here is just pulled up a list view where you filter by metadata type or by Salesforce type to show only custom objects. And then we're then additionally filtering down to only show the SBQQ and SBAA packages, so only CPQ, right? And then now I'm seeing that I can go through and I can set different levels of change tracking by all of the different custom objects that I have here within those packages. And so a couple different options are available for you. So here we've got tracked and non-blocking, which basically just means that I'm monitoring for these changes, and if somebody makes a change without a change request, then we would be capturing that. And you're also seeing this one here for blocking, where it's tracked and blocked, which means that if somebody goes in and makes a change to this specific block price, then it would be blocked if there isn't already an approval in the system. We don't see too much blocking taking place in our customer base, but some do enjoy that for particularly critical points. So once you've gone in and done this, these would automatically just be tied under that default policy that I showed you first. So you wouldn't necessarily know like, oh, this was a CPQ specific change. But what you can do is go in and create a custom policy. So you can see here that under this CPQ policy, everything is set to log changes only, which means that it's not actually capturing anything except for those specific 5 data records that were highlighted under the previous list view. Okay, so these are the things that we're tracking, and they're all linked back to the CPQ pricing policy, and I'll show you more about why that's relevant later. And so what I'm going to do is go through the system here, and I'm going to make 4 different changes to some of these, and I'll show you what blocking looks like, and then the other 3 changes will all go through. One of them or 2 of them will be compliant, meaning that there is already an open and approved change request there, and it's going to show you the reconciliation of that change. And then the other one is non-compliant, so you'll see that it's going to show you that there's no change request, and it's going to flag it because a controlled change happened that wasn't actually approved in advance. So first change that I'm going to make is to come into this block price and maybe change the price of it from $25 to $30, and I'm going to hit save. So if somebody's new to CPQ, this would be one of your administrators in the back end changing the default pricing for a particular range of sales. And so you can see here that when I went to go hit save, it said you must have an open and approved change request to update this record. And no matter how many times you do it, you won't be able to actually save that. So that's an example of a data record that is tracked and blocked. So next example, same idea. I'm going to change another block price. Instead of the small pickup, this is now the large pickup. If I go through and I change the price of this to say $37 and I hit save, you will see that that just went through, right? And so the reason for that is that this was tracked, but it's not tracked and blocked. Third example here for you. I'm going to come into my hardware premium discount rule, and I'll make a change to the price action, and maybe I'll change the discount value from 30 to 40%. And I'll hit save. So again, tracked, not blocked. And last example that I'll show you here, I'll make another change. I'll put the discount value here to 40. Okay, and so just like the metadata, anytime any of these are being changed, StrongPoint is creating one of those time-stamped, date-stamped change logs. And so when I refresh this, I just saw 3 change logs. So didn't create the change log for the blocked change because nothing actually happened, right? And then what I saw was 2 compliant changes and 1 non-compliant changes. And so my price actions here, you can see that both of them were automatically linked to my CPQ pricing policy, or you could call this like a SOX policy or whatever you wanted. But in other words, you know, this is a controlled change. This is the policy that applies. You can see for my non-compliant change, it does not show me a related change request. And that's really the reason why it was non-compliant, because we couldn't find one where it was referenced. Whereas for this second one, you can see that we did actually find this particular customization referenced inside an open and approved change request, meaning that we were expecting this to change. So we've automatically done that link for you. And then the third example is the same story. It's just now for block price instead. And so where we made that large pickup change, which was the second one that we made, or the first change that we actually made, it obviously did that reconciliation for you. And so all of these are going to have change logs for them, like what I showed you previously, where you can go in and you can see a diff summary of old values and new values, time stamped, date stamped, of exactly what was changed. This is a real challenge for folks that are looking at having Salesforce in scope for SOX and that leverage heavily applications like CPQ and billing. Okay, so I am right on time. I'm going to pull my presentation back up for a quick second here. And so, as I mentioned, tons of stuff goes into SOX. Salesforce covers a lot of it for you. You just need to have some processes that are built around it. Where we see people struggle is doing a deep dive into access and really understanding who can see and do what, specifically for the most kind of critical levels of access. Metadata, what configuration and customization is being made at the metadata level that's driving your order to cash process. And thirdly, what configuration data, so rules for things like pricing, products, discounts, approvals, you name it, all within managed packages, and also, you know, very closely impacting revenue. And then the most important question is, how are you maintaining visibility to these things, and how are you controlling for changes, change requests and approvals, so on and so forth. So I'll pause, we're right up against time, but if there's any questions, happy to sit through and chat.